turned GM's best kept secret into a fire-breathing dragon. We put a camshaft in the 6-liter of this LS cop car, and we make 430 horsepower at the tire.
So this is my 2012 Caprice PPV, which is a police pursuit vehicle. It's just a fancy way to say cop car. These were made by Holden, imported in the U.S. just as fleet vehicles. And what we have is actually a pretty cool package. I don't think a lot of people know what these are. When they see them, they think it's an Impala or something. But this is a rear-wheel drive, V8 powered, it's an LS motor. It's got independent rear, just like a G8 or a Camaro. And this really is, think of this as a G8 with Chevy badges, a heavy 4-door car that it's actually a pretty decent car. It's a 2012, so it's got, decent interior and whatever. It's not great, but because it's made to be a cop car. But this is the best part. Check this out. So this is an L77 LS V8. So think of this as an LS2 bottom end. So you have an aluminum block, 6-liter bottom end with an LS3 top end. So we're talking rectangle port heads, the big intake, 90mm throttle body, whatever it is. So essentially it's an LS3 with a tiny, tiny cam and not quite the same displacement. So it's a really cool platform to start with. Alright, so inside this L77 V8, there's this is the valley cover, and this has all of the solenoids on it for the cylinder deactivation. So these use oil pressure, and they direct oil pressure to and from the lifters to collapse them. So you can see electrical input there on the back. Yep, and then these get oil supplied, and this is the stock camshaft, and you can see there's an extra oil supply ring deal there. Alright, so all of that business goes to these super complicated lifters here, and it's a roller lifter just like a stock one. Here's a stock LS lifter there. This is an active fuel management or displacement on demand lifter. These things like to come apart right after your car gets out of warranty, or before if you're lucky. I was lucky and mine did not come apart, didn't have any issues. So I'm getting rid of these, replacing these with new regular LS3 lifters. And I'm getting rid of all of this in exchange for a stock LS3 valley panel. Summit! Cheers. Actually, this should just, well, there's a few parts in here. So a normal pan that does not go on a motor like this that has this displacement on demand won't have these bosses here. What these are cast into the pan so that they will seal off the surfaces of the block that are oil passages that come up to this system that we're removing. If you don't plug those holes up, if you just put like a factory pan on or factory cover, then these are all open and it's just going to be showering the bottom of your pan in oil, and you're not going to have oil pressure anywhere else. So alright, I've got my cylinder head kind of cleaned up here. Now it's time to do valve springs. We're putting a cam with higher lift and a lot more duration in it, so the valve springs are going to be stressed. What I have are 12-18 pack valve springs. These are really dirty. These are good for my camshaft, which is a 585 lift. I think you have to look on their website, but these have a limit on the lift. But they're a lot stiffer than the factory valve springs, so they're going to work pretty good with our cam. So I'm going to install these one at a time, and what I found works really well to remove the keepers is this. It's a Lyle 36050. I've used this on a bunch of different engines for pulling the keepers out. It's got two parts. The main part here is just it's an aluminum cylinder that has a magnet in the bottom, and what you do is you set it over top of your retainer, you pop it with a hammer, it pushes the valve spring down, and at the same time that strong magnet pulls those keepers up, allowing the whole thing to come up. If you don't have one of those, you can make a valve spring tool like I have here. This is good for installing and removing the valve spring. So you use your rocker arm stud there, you screw that in, and then basically you tighten that guy down once it's threaded in. You tighten the nut down and it pushes down on the valve spring so you can get the keepers out. I use it to reassemble. This is just a much easier way to disassemble. I'm going to put something in the cylinder or in the chamber just to kind of hold the valve in place. There we go. So what that did is, there we go. So you can see it retains, there's your retainer, and then your keepers are up in the hole there. So new valve spring, blow the fuzz off of it. And retainer. And this guy goes on. And then I'll thread that nut on there. I got my cordless impact and buzz it down, and it'll pull that right into place.
So you get your keeper back in,
Just like that. Just like that. And give it a pop. Make sure everything's seated. Giving it a good pop. There's one. There's two. That takes a lot less time than sticking this guy on there. And so, anyway, there you go. And do the rest of these. Alright, so one of the interesting things about the Caprice cop cars is that they have this weird block mounted oil cooler, engine oil cooler. So it's unique because it sits right next to the engine and goes right into the oil pan here. Problem with that, and the reason it's off the car, is because I have long tube headers and they will not come close to fitting with that cooler mounted to the side of the engine. So
Alright, we are back underneath the cop car today. It's cold out, but we're really close to being able to fire this up with the new cam and see how it sounds. But first, we have to take care of the exhaust, which means reconnecting the exhaust that I did on a previous video with the new headers, the long tube pipes, stainless headers that I put in. So we're going to do that. We're going to figure out our oxygen sensors and get those connected, change the oil, add coolant, do some tuning stuff, and then hopefully be able to fire it up for the first time. So whatever, but I've got my oxygen sensors plumbed in there and there. Those are the narrow band oxygen sensors that the stock computer needs to run. I'm also going to be installing a port for a wideband.
I just got done grinding, and the safety tip of the day is to wear earmuffs.
Alright, so here's the deal. So on this side, come on, light. Come. On this side, O2 sensor goes right up to there, to that connector. No extension necessary on this one, however. The connector's further up there. Yeah, there, you can see it way up there. And I'm about 6 inches short, giggity, so I'll need to make. Alright, so our extension was successful. Here it is hanging down there. It's actually plenty long. I could have probably made it 4 inches shorter.
Uh-oh.
Alright, so what I'm going to do now, hello! What I'm going to do now is mark where I'm going to weld in my O2 sensor bung here. This is the port where my wideband O2 sensor is going to get threaded into my exhaust pipe. And I want to put it on the upward side of my pipe, somewhere's up here, so that after a bunch of heating and cooling cycles, there's not a whole bunch of moisture that gathers in the sensor and then ends up ruining it. So you want it kind of up somewhere above the top half of the pipe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back here where I have some space here. I'm going to put it probably right about here. I'm just going to mark it. Let's see. Get it lined up.
So the cop car fires up. The L77 is sounding good, sounding healthy. I'm pumped that everything so far is working like it should. It's super cold out here, but I do not care because I tore the top end of this apart. I swapped the cam, I put on headers, lifters, it cleaned everything up. I'm really happy. It starts up, it's not great, the tune isn't there, but I don't really care. It idles, it runs, it revs. I can't wait to start street tuning this thing. Alright, I'm back in the shop again tonight. We had a little issue with the cop car. This weekend I was tuning on it just a little bit in the driveway, and I brought it up into the shop because I wanted to get the wideband hooked up to it and stuff. I got all that done. Fired it back up after that, and no oil pressure, 0. So I thought it was the oil pressure sensor, so I got a new one of those, and still I have nothing. I checked by applying pressure to that with like an air hose, with it out of the engine, and it reads fine. So what I did is I pulled the intake and the valley cover, and it is pretty. Here's the bottom of that tray. You can see the block offs there. All the O-rings for the block offs look good. That'll also give you oil pressure problems, but literally it. So anyway, not the best news, but hey, this is part of it. I don't think I heard anything too bad, so I need to get the S10 output shaft stuff all taken care of and get this thing off the lift. Get this moved onto the lift, pull the pan off, and see what the damage is. O-ring on the top of the pickup tube where it goes in the oil pump. This thing will get pinched, and then all of a sudden you're sucking air in around the brake and the oil, or the O-ring. You're not sucking any oil up, and you lose oil pressure. So this one is good. But what I found is when I took my oil pump apart, there's a pressure relief valve here, this guy, that goes up in this hole, and it just is forced up to close off that hole there to keep oil flowing through the oil pump. Well, this deal was stuck in that hole about like that when I opened this thing up. Went on to good old Rock Auto, and I got a Melling replacement standard volume pump. That's how it's done right there. Get nice and hot, slide it right on. Alright, so now that the cop car is running under its own power with a new camshaft and oil pressure this time, it's time to dial in the fuel tables with HP tuners. So what we'll do is we'll do some street tuning where we will adjust the VE table, that's volumetric efficiency table, just by doing some logs while driving it around in the street. We'll get it close as we can without going to the dyno, just to get stuff so it's nice and safe. Once we get to Muletown dyno, we will adjust the full throttle VE portions, and then we'll also dial in the spark tables. So unfortunately, once we got to Muletown dyno, the camera that I had set up to take the footage kind of took a dump on me, so we don't really have any good video footage of the dyno itself. But we do have results, so let's talk about those. So right out of the box, 384 horsepower at 5750. That's with stock ignition advance. So we're talking about 18 degrees here. Not real good. Also 367 foot-pounds of torque at 5200. What I did here is I started with the baseline ignition advance, and then I added a couple degrees every single pull until it stopped making power. Then I backed it down just to be safe and locked it in for total ignition advance. And I think I ended up at like 28 degrees all in or something. So there's probably still a little bit more power to be had by tweaking with it, but 432 horsepower at 5900 RPM is a really good number to start with, considering this is a cam and exhaust only upgrade. Also considering that a stock 6-liter in one of these cars makes 355 horsepower at the crank, which is about 300 horsepower at the tires. So that's it. A cam and exhaust upgrades got us 430 horsepower at the tire with a Chevrolet cop car. Now there are more upgrades to do to this thing, but we'll have to save those for another day in the Muletown Speed Shop.